And welcome back to another episode of the Double Doing Podcast. My name is Brendan Deek. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It would be greatly appreciated. You can also rate the podcast and review the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. It would also be greatly appreciated. Got a really cool guest today on the episode, the guy I've been wanting to talk to for a very long time. I am joined by the editor at The Ringer, and he's also the host of the Press Box podcast. Bryan Curtis is with me. Bryan, man, how we doing?
Good to see you, Brendan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. Really appreciate taking the time to come on. Like I said, I told you before the episode, before we started, that I've been a big fan of the Press Box over the last year because I'm a media. It's funny. I was trying to explain to my mom, but what the podcast about, I'm like, it's a media podcast about media. Is that the best way to describe it?
That's fair, right? And I feel when you say the word media, sometimes people who aren't in this business, their eyelids go half shut. But then you say it's about the media, but then it's really about sports and it's about politics and it's about the arts and books and all these kinds of other things. And we just follow that wherever it leads us.
Yep. No, it's very entertaining. Highly recommend. After you listen to this one, of course, make sure you go check out and subscribe to the Press Box podcast. Bryan is one of the hosts there. So, Bryan, I want to talk about a little bit of football before we kind of jump into the grander scheme of things. What do you make of the Kyler Murray saga that happened over the last couple of days? What do you make about this clause in his contract, them pulling it from his contract yesterday? Kind of give me your overall take on this.
It feels like the Cardinals had a very serious concern about Kyler Murray, and that's the reason that they put that in there when they gave him all that money. And then it was one of those things. I sort of have banned myself from using the word bad look because I always wonder, is it a bad look or is it just bad? But this is one of those things that as soon as everybody finds out about it, they go, whoa, the Cardinals this concerned about Kyler Murray? Oh my gosh. And then Murray has to say up there, well, no, I would have studied anyway. And there was this I saw some tweets that were seemingly phrased from his camp saying, oh, this was just important to the Cardinals. So of course, Kyler Murray agreed to this, but then of course you have to take that out. I mean, I don't quite understand how you get up to paying somebody that much money, investing in them being your quarterback, and then also having to mandate how much they study. It sort of feels like you either make the decision that they're your quarterback and you're going to roll with them through good and bad or not.
So I'm curious at how this came out. Do you know how it got to Ian Rappaport and then out to the consumers? Like, whose idea was it to put this out there?
That's a great question. I don't know. I actually had the same thought. And I haven't looked into that yet, but you'd kind of like to know, right?
It's bizarre. I feel kind of embarrassed for Kyler a little bit. Like this, he signed his $230 million deal. This is a spotlight. It's time to get paid. Family's happy. His friends are happy. And then this comes out. It's kind of a kick in the butt. Like I feel really bad for the guy.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you just put any of us in his shoes. Like if a company were to invest in you in any way and said, but we're going to have to spell it out that we want you to work hard at your job. We won't just tell you that. We don't just encourage you according to the way we're going to really put it in writing that you have to work this hard at your job because maybe we feel at some level of our being that you're not going to do it. Of course that would be humiliating for any of us.
So I follow. I think is it Spot Track or Spot Rack, the company that does the contracts? I think it's Spot Track, right? So he had a tweet and he said that the way the contract's built is it's like a 5-year deal. And usually 5-year deals in the NFL are like 3 or 2-year deals with guaranteed money, right? That's the NFL. It's all kind of funny money, but the way it's built is he's going to get all $230 million basically. Like it'd be very tough for him to get it. And it almost sounds like he was saying basically it almost sounded like the Cardinals would kind of try to sneak in little clauses to not get him that $230 million. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
yeah. And it's a really interesting franchise. My colleague Kevin Clark at The Ringer was saying, wait a second, if we're talking about people doing their homework, what about the people who've been drafting players for the Cardinals? Which I thought was a really good point. It's like if we're putting these institutional mechanisms in, maybe it's not just the quarterback who needs them, maybe it's other people.
Yeah, Zaven Collins played 20% of the snaps last year, first-round pick. Calvin Beachum, Will Hernandez, probably the worst right side of the offensive line. Trey McBride in the second round when you sign Zach Ertz. Josh Jones in the second round. Andy Isabella in the third round. Akeem Butler in the fourth round. The list goes on and on. I completely agree with what Kevin said. This is a Steve Keim problem, not a Kyler Murray problem, in my opinion.
By the way, it's interesting when you rattle off all those draft picks. A lot of draft Nick darlings on that list.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Zaven Collins, Andy Isabella, a lot of those, people I follow on Twitter are really excited about on draft day. So it's not like they were picking guys that people weren't fired up about. Anyway, please.
When you have the chance of drafting 2 off-ball linebackers in the first round back-to-back years, you just got to take the chance. It makes complete sense when you have a young quarterback. That it's a perfect way to help out your young quarterback.
There you go.
All right, so we're just getting into kind of the dog days of NFL hot take season. People are starting to spew out some takes. I'm starting to spew out some takes. We got training camp video. I know you're a big training camp video type of guy,
Oh my God.
big media consumer type of guy. You are. I know you love that. Brian, give me a flaming hot take you have going into this NFL season.
Wait, are we talking about the training camp videos?
No, just in general. I want just in general one. No.
So I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. Well, let's just spend 1 second talking about those training camp videos because it's very funny, right? It's like, here is one rep that somebody is doing in training camp.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put this on Twitter so that you, the fan of the team, can get really excited about this. And it's usually like an overwhelmingly positive rep. Like, look at the receiver. Wow, he just burned the corner. Touchdown. Amazing, right? And as a fan, because if the receiver ran 20 yards and fell down, that's probably not going to be on. They're probably not going to put that up.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, it's something that seems totally out of context and completely useless in understanding how good a player is going to be or not going to be. On the other hand, as a fan of a team, I say this as a Dallas Cowboys fan, I watch all those. I'm like, oh, look at CeeDee Lamb.
It's funny, like it suckers you in. Like, so the perfect example is last year. I don't know if you saw this clip. I posted on my Twitter about, I think it was like last week. Jalen Reagor, he had this insane one-handed spinning catch at the corner of the end zone in training camp last year. Eagles fans were fired up. Oh, he's back. We'll make amends for the Justin Jefferson pick. It was a great catch. Like, don't get me wrong, it looked awesome. But then he's still Jalen Reagor.
Yeah. And if you remember, you and I are old enough to remember that about it's probably like more like 7-8 years ago, reporters would do this from training camp without the video.
Yep.
They'd just be like, great catch by Des Bryant.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, I'd be sitting there at home going, okay.
I think they still do it though, right? Like, it's not like, I know they do the videos I don't know if I don't know the beat writer like rules and stuff, but I don't know if they're officially allowed to videotape all the practice, right? Like, I don't think in the team drills they're allowed, right? So I think when they're doing like the 11-11 team drills, you're not allowed to videotape it because they don't want that out there to other teams, right? So I think that's when they'll do the great catch by Dez at the 20-yard line or something like that, right? So they still do it. It's a very funny time of year. It's the time for beat writers to shine, though, right? This is the prime time for beat writers because they're at the stadiums, they're there every day, and then you have the national guys going from team to team, and they only get them for one day. So I feel like I'm a big proponent of follow beat writers more than national writers when it comes to a specific team. And I just feel like this is a great time for them to kind of get their time in the spotlight, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it makes you realize how much of the appeal of sports writing is talking to fans who wish they were doing what you were doing.
Yeah.
That's where those "my office for the day" tweets come from, where you're standing on the sidelines at training camp, like, oh, I'm live on the scene, and it really, that the only appeal of that is to brag about the fact that you got to get on a plane, and also to say, for the person home, to say, well, I wish I were standing there watching football right now rather than whatever it is I'm doing, which is, again, that's part of what attracted many of us to these jobs.
Yeah.
Flaming hot take. Can we do the Cowboys?
Yeah, go for it. I was actually going to bring up the Cowboys after this, so we'll tie it into that anyways.
I'm starting to climb on the Cowboys might not win the NFC East bandwagon. I think there's kind of a hot take, if I can separate those two words for a second, that the Eagles are going to win the NFC East, that the Cowboys took a big step back in the offseason. I'm not basing this on a 20-second training camp video. I'm not basing this necessarily on a huge study of the roster or how good Tyler Smith's going to be a guard this year. I'm basing this on Jerry Jones's opening press conference.
I did see this.
Strangest hours I have ever seen. And I've watched a lot and tried to decode a lot of Jerry Jones, but it was kind of teary when he was talking about his former colleague, Larry Lacewell, who used to run personnel for the Cowboys or help out with personnel for the Cowboys. There was a whole big thing at the beginning about how he said, I'm sticking with Mike McCarthy before anybody asked about it.
Yeah.
I'm loyal to Mike McCarthy, but I had options this offseason.
Yeah, I did. Yes, I did see this on Twitter. It's
such a bizarre thing to express commitment. I'm sticking with you, but I had options. And of course, Mike McCarthy is sitting next to Jerry Jones, I believe, during this press conference.
What was really funny about the Mike McCarthy hiring is I remember when they brought him in, the media hype, or I guess the publicity stunts they tried to pull to try to convince people that Mike McCarthy deserved the job. Like, Mike McCarthy watched every Dallas Cowboy game last year. It's like, okay, I feel like that's just a prerequisite for any job is to study what coaching you're going into. The PFF tour, I don't know if you heard that he did the tour of the PFF buildings. Chris Collinsworth brought Mike McCarthy through the PFF buildings, so he's becoming an analytic guy. It's like, we don't need convincing that Mike McCarthy's a good coach. He's probably not going to be, and I feel like as Cowboys fans, it's kind of turned that way too. Like, I'm assuming you're not a big Mike McCarthy guy, are you?
No. And remind me, wasn't he watching all those Cowboy games in a barn?
Yeah, it was a bar. And didn't Jerry Jones sleep over at the barn or something like that? They had a sleepover because they had a little too many whiskeys or something like that. I can't remember the exact story, but yeah.
Someone locked the barn. I don't nobody go in the barn anymore. The barn is no good. I'm not a Mike McCarthy fan. I mean, it's one of these things with the Cowboys as a fan where you're going from, there was a big it's not Jason Garrett element to anybody who would be the next coach of the Dallas Cowboys. You've seen the weird Kellen Moore. We love this guy. We are okay with this guy kind of up and down of Dallas Cowboys fans. Dan Quinn, again, not anybody's idea of another hot head coaching prospect who now has a lot of Cowboy fans in his corner.
He turned out to be good, though. He had a great year.
He did, but I mean, as a head coach, right? Like thinking, wow, does he deserve another chance? Maybe is the answer. But I'm not sure anybody would have said that if Mike McCarthy wasn't your head coach, or at least said that in quite the same way.
What do you put the percentage chance on that Sean Payton is the coach of the 2023 Cowboys? You think it happens?
It's really hard. I'm only basing this on the fact of whether Sean Payton wants to do this, or whether Sean Payton has just used Jerry Jones as leverage expertly throughout his entire career to get raises from the Saints, to get power inside the building in New Orleans, and now to get his next job, which actually won't be with the Cowboys.
Yeah.
I think if I had to bet, it would probably be that. Because whenever anybody is talking about their future aloud, we've seen this with Charles Barkley all week, when everybody's just talking about their career prospects, or you see these planted stories, or, always thinking about this, thinking about that, I'm always thinking like, that's just leverage, right? Like that at least should be partly or mostly interpreted as leverage against somebody else. So to me, if you have Jerry Jones as leverage, it's kind of the ultimate leverage, because we know he will pay Sean Payton a lot of money if possible. He will potentially give up draft pick compensation to the Saints to go get Sean Payton. He will do something pretty desperate, but that also sets Sean Payton up to go elsewhere potentially and get a great deal.
What would a trade look like for a Sean Payton? Like, how would he even base that? Like, first, maybe? Like, I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and do you want to give that up?
Yeah, exactly. For a team that kind of needs some like an infusion of young talent, right? Like they've kind of missed their window, right? They're looking for kind of like Ezekiel Elliott. That kind of era is over, right? One of my bigger takes, I had John Machota on my podcast this offseason. He was the writer for The Athletic, great, one of my favorite Cowboy beat writers, probably my favorite Cowboy beat writer. Great follow. He was, and he brought this up too. It's kind of tough for Cowboy fans to kind of realize that they had their 4-year window, and not just they had their 4-year window, they had a great 4-year window. Like they had Dak Prescott on a rookie contract, but not just a rookie contract, a 4th-round rookie contract, like $600K. Like, you know what I mean? Like starting quarterbacks don't make $600,000 a year. It just doesn't happen. Right?
Totally. And now, so you went from that scenario where you had him incredibly cheaply to a scenario where the way this Cowboy season turns out anything other than mediocre, 1 and done, 2 and done in the playoffs is that Dak Prescott just goes crazy, right? And Dak Prescott plays well for an entire season, played great at the beginning of last season, but plays at a really, really high level for the entire season in a way that maybe most people don't see coming. Maybe a few people see that coming, but I don't know. It's interesting.
So you brought up Charles Barkley. We're going to transition outside of football here. I'm a big golf guy. I have a membership at a golf course right down the street from me. I've been golfing since I was 10. Love the PGA Tour. Love watching the events. Give me your take on LIV Golf. What does it look like in the future? What does it look like, I guess, in the media space in America? Because it sounds like they're opening up the checkbook to Charles Barkley. He was just I believe he was at the Pro-Am yesterday, I believe. No?
He was.
There, yeah. It sounds like they're getting momentum, right? They just got Faraday signed there. Is it ever going to be on TV screens in America, you think?
Well, it's Barkley. Just to update you, told the New York Post for just as we were coming to do this podcast, he's not going to live, and he's actually going to stick with Turner. But to your question, yeah, I think they're trying to create something right now, both a product on the course and a TV product that is going to be interesting to television companies, right, or streaming companies, and also one that will get streaming companies over this hump of moral queasiness about being in business with the LIV Tour.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Barkley would have been a really interesting way to do that because he's not really a golf commentator. He's sort of a golfer, but he's funny on TV, and as we were talking about this on the press box the other day, it's sort of, if you're trying to create this permission structure for people to watch LIV Golf that might have been saying, "Oh, I don't know if I want to watch this. I don't know if this feels right." You put somebody like Charles Barkley who's on there, who has all this goodwill built up for years of television, of course, his NBA career and all that stuff. But I don't know, to your answer. I'm interested to see if there's a network willing to take that leap, because there's a ton of, obviously, there's a lot of moral questions about it, and there's just a lot of practical downsides to do it, in terms of the business they're in, if they're in business with the PGA, that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I'd kind of be surprised. LIV has signed so many golfers that I'd suppose it's tempting to somebody to do that, but I don't have a real clear sense of that.
I'm assuming Fox News would jump on it, no? At some point.
Yeah, I mean, Fox just got out of the golf business weirdly a couple of years ago. You remember they had the U.S. Open,
yeah,
right? And they decided, no, we don't want this, and we're going to kind of just give this away. So I don't know. Would they want to be in that? Maybe, but I think they're NFL and Masked Singer and a little baseball all the way.
Did you? I know you do mailbags for the press box. Did you get any questions about how awful the CBS coverage was at the U.S. Open? I think it was CBS did it, right?
It was NBC.
NBC. One of the worst covers opens or anything I've ever watched. It was awful.
I saw the no laying up guys. And it's weird with golf tournaments.
Yeah,
it's not the same, and there have been this thing, and I remember one of the Fox tournaments, I believe it was the U.S. Open at Chambers Bay that Jordan Spieth won. He just kind of wasn't on the broadcast. Hope I'm remembering this right, just for a long time, and all of a sudden he won the tournament on Sunday. Yeah. Wait, what?
It's a weird sport to broadcast, and I checked in on the LIV Golf when I think it was the first or second term. I checked it on YouTube, and the thing I liked about it is they always showed a shot. I think within I think they did like a comparison in an hour span in the LIV tournament compared to the NBC tournament. They showed like 60 or 30 minutes, 66 shots of the LIV compared to like 30 at NBC. Because someone takes a shot and then they showed the FedEx Cup standings, or they show like a made-up graphic that they had. They show the highlight. The amount of times that they showed Matthew Fitzpatrick winning the amateur British Open or U.S. Open, that tournament that he won, like, we get it. He won. We don't need to see highlights of him over and over again as a 13-year-old putting in on the 18th green, right? Like, I feel like golf broadcast is probably one of the worst broadcasts of sports just from the lack of action you get there.
Yeah, you see criticism on Twitter. That's what people say. Just show golf.
Exactly.
We don't need just like a shot of Justin Leonard sitting behind a desk talking.
Yeah, exactly.
We're all good.
So what did you make of the Manning broadcast last year? And do you think companies or just companies that show sports on TV will they start to kind of transition into maybe that form of role where you have kind of two personalities that play the sport, cover it on a separate, make a paid subscription or something along those lines?
The big place we're going to see this is Amazon starting this year with Thursday Night Football, just because the technology is so much easier. You don't have to have another linear television channel to do it. You can just pick whichever commentary track you want. So if you have Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit, that's your absolutely down the middle kind of football broadcast we're used to. Amazon has also hinted that they're also going to maybe do these for like 4-week spans. We're not committing necessarily to 16 weeks of an alternate broadcast. Let's do 4. Let's see how it turns out. I think they're going to have a bunch of them. I mean, that's been my indication, but it's not totally clear to me if you're going to see the ex-athlete thing, if you're going to see a ex-athlete, but it's about comedy and other stuff thing, like a Pat McAfee type broadcast. If you're just going to do something very numbers oriented, gambling oriented, there's a lot of different ways you can go. A lot of those I think have pretty limited appeal. I mean, the Manning cast is unique because it's very, very hardcore football-y. Plus it has guests, but it also has the Manning brothers, who are gigantic high wattage stars. I really did like that last year. Even if I felt as a mere mortal, the football X's and O's talk was way over my head at times. I'm the first person just going to admit, like, I would watch it, be like, I like this, but I kind of don't know what they're talking about right now.
Yeah. I liked it from quarter 1 to 3, but when I got like into the crunch time, like I had to go to the regular broadcast.
I tell you what they did. Was it week 1 when they had Russell Wilson on?
Yes, it was week 1.
Raiders game, right? That came down to the last possession. That was awesome because he was locked in and was talking about what it was like to be a quarterback in that kind of situation. But then other times, yes, it got a little distracting in the fourth quarter. He's like, let's do the game.
Do you think that this will become the norm? Like, do you think this is just experimental and it won't last?
I think it'll become the norm, especially as things transition to streaming, because it's just, like I said, it's just easier. I mean, I know because talking to television people also, by the way, have big egos. They don't like to be programmed against.
Yeah.
I think it would have been interesting if Fox had gone to Joe and Troy before they went to Monday Night Football and said, hey, we're going to put another telecast on FS1 against you. I'd be interested to see how that would have gone over. I don't think terribly well. So there is that thing too. Do you want to, and does it make sense to split up the audience? Because as we've seen with the Manning Cats, it's not like you're necessarily going to add X number of viewers. You're probably going to peel off a pretty small number, maybe add a few. So there's an interesting, how much are we really paying to do all this kind of proposition there too?
And you made a great point. Like the Manning brothers are they're their own entity. Like they're hard to replicate the Manning brothers. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna get the Sedin twins for hockey if you're gonna do it or something like that. Like it's hard to kind of replicate those two personalities. So a lot of talk about NFL Sunday Ticket lately, about where it's going, the future of watching football. Bryan, in your opinion, what is the best way or the best place for consumers to consume football? Like if you were to kind of run where NFL games are played or where NFL games are shown and how much you pay or where you get it from, what would you do? Let's say if you were in charge of this.
You're saying like what kind of streaming service would I put?
Yeah, like where would you put it? How would you because it's all over the place. Now you got Amazon, right? So Thursday night you got to go to Amazon. Sunday Ticket, like for instance, I'm based out in Toronto, Canada, so we had to buy, like Rogers sells it to for you $160, I believe, for the year, $230 for the year, $40 or something like that. Like, what is the best way for this to get solved? Because I just feel like no one has a game plan for this.
At least in the United States, we're obviously very spoiled with pro football because so much of it is free. I think people really realize that. Sometimes it's hard to get our minds around that. I always cite my mom, who literally has a bunny ears hookup antenna on top of her house, does not have cable, and is able to watch every single Dallas Cowboys game if she wants to, all of Sunday Night Football, CBS game of the week. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, there's so much of it. So now what you're talking about is pretty different than the NBA and other sports that are largely behind cable paywalls already, taking the stream. You're talking about taking something maybe that in the future you're talking about that would be more difficult. I don't know. I mean, so I have DirecTV right now, and the reason I like DirecTV is because I can flip between the games. Jimmy Traina, who covers media, has talked about this. Like, we go down the app road, are we going to be able to just push a button and toggle between games?
That's the thing with Amazon on Thursday nights, right? Like now you're going to have to specifically watch football on a TV, right? Like you're going to have to get out of the app and go. Let's say you like. I'm a converter flipper guy, like commercial. You got a minute. Like I've got the attention span of a squirrel. So like, you know what I mean? Like I want to watch, I don't want to watch the same commercial over and over again, unless it's a Super Bowl. Right. So we're getting into this weird streaming environment now where I'm kind of scared of the way football is going to be programmed.
And Amazon's a little different, right? Because there's just one football game on at that, or one pro football game on. I guess you just literally was being and watch the college game that night, but there's one football game on. So it's not like you're losing anything, where Sunday is more complicated. So I want, in my magical universe that I'm creating on the spot, something that allows me to flip between games very, very easily, something that interacts with the rest of my television a little more, because it doesn't seem like, again, we're talking about like 2020, let's see, it's 2023, where I'm still going to have to be watching probably over-the-air games in Los Angeles over the air, right, through CBS or through a different streaming app, and then go over to the NFL Sunday Ticket. That's just, it's weird.
Did you ever hear about the debacle that was DAZN in Canada? DAZN,
I don't remember DAZN Canada.
So DAZN, do you know what DAZN is? It's a streaming service. Yeah. So DAZN bought. So back, it was about 2 years ago, DAZN bought the rights for NFL streaming in Canada. So if you wanted to watch, so that's where NFL Sunday Ticket was for about of the first month in September. You had to buy it through DAZN. So every Canadian, if you wanted to have Sunday Ticket, that's where you had to go. And it was the worst streaming platform ever. It was laggy, about 10 seconds. We were about 15 seconds behind. So I would get updates on Twitter before the ball would go. It would go in and out. Canadians were losing their marbles. They were calling like Rogers. They were calling Bell. Those are the two big those are the two big telemarketing companies or telestreaming companies in Canada. Telecommunications, sorry. They were losing their minds. They were like, they couldn't watch football games. They basically forced the CRTC, which is the Canadian regulations of who they regulate the just programming in Canada. They forced Rogers and Bell to buy back Sunday Ticket from the NFL because the zone turned out to be such a disaster. It was the worst month of football ever. My dad, I remember I was coming home from a cottage. My dad was like calling like losing his mind on DAZN. He couldn't get a hold of DAZN customer service because he was watching the Washington game. It was chaos. And like I just feel like I don't want that ever to happen again, you know. You should look into it, man. It was very interesting. You should look up that month in Canada with DAZN streaming.
A very angry month for NFL fans.
Yeah, I think you'll get a good laugh out of it.
It's yeah, and like I guess we're talking like right now, right? We're talking Amazon, Apple, potentially Google, something like that. So hopefully the bugginess is at a minimum, but it's a big jump for everybody.
Yeah.
And like I was talking to somebody in television this week, like there is going to be a let's call it a consequential percentage of the population that for that first Thursday night game in week 2 on Amazon is going to be like, how do I do this?
Yeah.
Do I have Prime?
Yeah.
What do I do? Why am I not able to watch the NFL game tonight?
Your mom's a perfect example, right? You're like, have you had this conversation with her yet?
All these late conversations with our parents. Mom, here's how to watch the game on Prime. She does have Prime. I don't know. She may be just like piecing out of the game entirely, but we'll sit down and have a conversation about how to watch it.
Okay, so I want to talk about this with you. I'm really curious by this. I've been wanting to ask you this question for a while, or someone that's in the media this for a while. Draymond Green has this saying called the new media, and he's been saying it a lot. And I love your reaction because that's my reaction to it as well. Do you ever think eventually media, like athletes, will fully take over this space, or is Draymond Green nuts?
No, they won't fully take over this space. And I don't know, is Draymond Green proposing that athletes are going to fully take over the space?
Is that what he means by new media? Like, I'm very curious. I don't really understand his stance on it.
It's a little fuzzy, but I think what he means is, a number of athletes that want to, doing the equivalent of his podcast after a game, or a recent retiree like JJ Redick coming out and doing a podcast and sort of being on, and then those guys also going and challenging people like Stephen A. Smith. You talk about basketball this way. No. Mm-hmm. We don't accept that. We don't, this is the way you should be talking about basketball and talking about basketball players. I don't think the public wants athletes to take over.
No, I don't.
I think they love athletes. I think they do like listening to things like that, and watching things like that, and obviously following, athletes on social media, all that stuff. That's not news, but they do want independent voices, and they do want perspectives of people that can teach them things about sports and report on things and come at it from a point of view, not of the athlete, but of a journalist. And I firmly believe that. And I think that's also been borne out by history and by everything else. And, look, he is effectively, and a lot of these athletes are effectively our competitors in a sense, because they're putting out a podcast that people might listen to instead of our NBA Finals postgame podcast. Mm-hmm. But that also is challenging, I think, to the media. Like, you have to be good, and it can't just be like, I'm sitting there taking a 20-second video standing on the sidelines. Yeah, I'm putting a microphone in somebody's face after practice. You have to add something to that. That should be an encouragement to us all to do that.
Totally. You brought up Stephen A. Smith, and what I've kind of noticed the way that I don't know if I'm correct on this, but I've kind of noticed the way that sports media is transitioning is you're seeing a few Stephen A. Smiths and a lot of people that are making a ton less money than the Stephen A. Smith. Is that right? Is that the way sports media should be going? I'm assuming Stephen A. Smith is making 15 times more money than the next guy, or not. I don't know, 15 times, but some sort of large sum. There's maybe 2 or 3, like Mike Greenberg. I'm assuming Mike Greenberg, right? The guy that doesn't. I'm assuming he probably makes a ton, but like it feels like they're just rotating these guys out under them. And you have the big dog, and then you rotate the little dogs in and out, and then they're getting shuffled through companies. Like, I don't like that strategy. What do you think about that?
It's changed just slightly a little bit just because of the NFL salaries that were just handed out to Joe Traitman at ESPN. But your point is correct, which is that ESPN has changed from a system where you had a lot of, let's say, there's a lot of money, right? This is not middle tier in any other sense except television. A lot of middle tier stars and some big stars and some people all the way down. This is just in terms of pay. I'm not talking about quality or anything like that, to a system that is assembled around a tiny handful of big stars.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. And beyond those personalities, there's a much more of a willingness to shuffle people around at the rest of the company. And no, I don't like that.
Yeah. It's annoying. Like, I don't need to hear Stephen A. Smith. I don't need to hear Stephen A. Smith's take on boxing. Like I don't need to hear Stephen A. Smith on the MMA show because you pay him $30 million a year, or take on golf. It bothers me, it bothers me that they think this one to three stars can dominate the entire sporting industry. That's not the way it should work.
So it reminds me a little bit of a cable news channel. Cable news decided this a few years ago. We're going to have four primetime stars. And those are the people who are going to be such dominant voices on our network that you're going to turn on the network and always see them.
Yeah.
What's happening?
Yeah.
A little bit like ESPN these days.
Okay, so I want to ask kind of a more serious question. This is kind of, we're going to transition to the politics side of things, because I'm really interested. I'm really intrigued by the way that consumers consume politics and where they get their information from. I think it's actually a huge deal and very important in today's society. So I'm a type of guy that I will listen to try to both sides of the conversation, left wing, right wing, whatever you want to say, whatever we want to call it, and then you make your own opinion. I'm even having a hard time doing that nowadays because I can't stand listening to the right wing side, left wing side. Have you heard of Breaking Points with Crystal and Sagar? It's a political show.
I don't think so.
I would highly recommend checking out. They're kind of they're neutral, and they just kind of spit out. Crystal Ball used to work for MSNBC back in the day. But anyways, they're kind of down the middle. They just tell it how it is. They tell you the facts and you decide what to make of it with the facts. Like now you got Fox News. They tell it's half lies. CNN tells half lies. I'm very confused at how this can kind of keep going. Is there a future where we're going to get rid of the left wing and right wing style media sources? Or is this just here to stay and people are going to have to dig out their content themselves? Because that's the problem, is people can't change channels. They have one channel that they watch. You got the guy sitting in his chair drinking 12 beers a night watching Fox News, and that's the only media coverage you'll get, right? That's just not the way humans should be getting their news. I just wanted to throw it out there. I want to see your take on that.
Well, let's say we waved our magic wand, since we're talking about creating the media we want, and put in some kind of old school network style news or BBC style news in America, and the highly partisan cable channels disappear. I think the bad news from that scenario would be that people would then start relying even more on news they read on Facebook and social media, which is, worse.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know that really would fix things. And that's not a great answer, because I just think we're way past the point.
We're in too deep, baby.
Yeah. And there's what are you going to do? Facebook can say, okay, we're going to crack down on this handful of accounts, which we think is misinformation. Okay. Well, there'll be more, or there'll be different ones that have slightly less misinformation, but somehow make it through the censor. And I don't know what to do about that. Or, we're saying accounts. I just listen to other people on Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is. I don't have a great solution to that. I don't know that we're going to have, be in an information news political utopia, media wise, anytime soon.
No, you're right. It just doesn't work. You can't censor one thing and then the other people get mad. Just like you're never going to be able to kind of pull that off. That will be perfect. You're right. We'll never be in a utopia of news media. I wish there was, because I do firmly believe that the content that people take in on the politics side of things is a huge mark on our society. Like I truly believe that.
And there's much more good stuff. That's the if there's any bright side here, there's much more good stuff available to your average American consumer than there ever has been. Mm-hmm. I grew up in the newspaper era in Fort Worth, Texas, and my news sources were the Dallas Morning News and maybe the Fort Worth Star Telegram and the nightly news on the networks. Mm-hmm. And that was it. I mean, and I think my family got Newsweek every week. I don't know if we got Time. So you're talking about a very tiny number of sources, and we could romanticize that world, and in some ways maybe we should, but at the same time, there was not much. I was not able to just access 100 talented political reporters, honest, talented political reporters on Twitter, the drop of a hat. So the good news is there's more good stuff out there available than ever before, but there's infinitely more bad stuff available than ever before as well.
Okay, Brian, we went a little over time, but I got to squeeze in this one last question because I was doing it on the hoorah. So you had a podcast with Bill Simmons, I believe it was about a month ago. That was probably my favorite press box episode. It was awesome. Bill Simmons was I guess he was the pioneer of sports podcasting, you say, maybe?
Yeah, certainly at the creation somewhere.
Yeah. So when he started, he was number one, like he was the first guy, and now everyone's mom and their dad and their brother have a sports podcast, right? Like everyone's got a sports podcast now. There's so many out there. What do you think the future of podcasting looks like? Do you think it's video based? Do you think we'll always have an audio base? What do you think it looks like in the next 5-10 years? And if you were to advise someone who's starting a podcast right now, what advice would you give them?
The best advice I give anybody is the most important thing you should do is, if you have a podcast with another host, is to work on your on-air relationship with the other host to get that ironed out. I cannot tell you how many podcasts I listen to that are based around 2 or 3 hosts where there's absolutely no chemistry and no vibe. And it's usually because one or more people are just talking in Spalding Gray length monologues for 15 minutes, and then somebody else has a monologue, and then somebody else has a monologue, and I'm like, this is not how human conversation works.
Yeah.
And it's due to what? Like insecurity, and I want my moment here, and I want my moment, everybody. And what they haven't done is like said, how is this relationship that we have in public going to be interesting to other people? Fair. So to me, that's the biggest thing I always say. And of course, you want to be smart, and you want to have interesting things to say, and you want to do your research so that you're not just completely making, speaking out of your head. But like, if you don't get that right, it's really, really hard. And there's a lot of really bad listens out in the world, including at major media companies.
There's too much content now to listen to bad content. That's kind of been a motto I have. There's too much content out there to be listening to bad content.
I know. And I give, sometimes I'll give something like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I'll like, ooh. Yeah. Ooh. And if it's an interview show, and I do interview shows too, it's the same question. It's just a little different. How is this vibe going to be that a person's going to listen to me and then listen to my guest, listen to whatever interaction that we are coming up with on the fly, listen to my questions, listening to how much I talk versus how much they talk. It's hard, right? And I don't know if I could just like write down exactly what makes a good show, but we know it when we hear it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's always my best advice.
It's like, did you ever watch Criminal Minds, the TV show, or like one of those NCISs? It's funny when they always give their previews out to the cops. There's 6 of them, and they each have their 15 seconds to be like, the perp has black hair. This guy says that for 10 seconds. Then the boss says his point for 10 seconds. It's like, that's not how interactions work in police stations. Like, not everyone gives like, he's 6 foot tall and this is where we're going to find him. And the next guy's like, and he's got black hair. It's just like, not everyone has their monologue, right? Like it's funny, but that's what your point kind of reminded me of. But what does the future of podcasting look like? What do you think the next 5 to 10? Is there going to be any like, I guess, technology advancements in this? Like, are we all going to be looking the same in 5-10 years?
It's funny when we think of the technology advancements. Some of those people I interview sometimes in sports radio laugh about this because, hey, well, you guys, your technology advancement is that you're doing your podcast live. We already have a medium called that can do that. It's called radio. So congratulations on inventing something that has already been invented. Yeah. No, I mean, I think faster turnaround times. There's certainly going to be lots and lots more podcasts. That's my most confident bit of futurism, and that the barrier to entry is going to be lower than ever. But I do think the great leveler here would be: do you have something to say? Do you have something that you can really create? And I listen to lots of sports radio, which I love. And I'm always amazed at the talent of so many of those hosts because they have 4 hours a day and they can't just come on and be like, we're taking your calls. Call us with sports questions. And when I see a podcaster, and Shoemaker and I have certainly been guilty of this sometimes, but it's like, hey, send us questions and we'll answer them on the podcast. I'm like, okay, that's kind of an idea. But you're, long term, you're really going to get by. Do you have ideas? Are you clever? Are you interesting? Is somebody listening to this and hearing something they can't hear elsewhere in the universe?
Mm-hmm. Bryan Curtis of The Ringer. Thanks so much, man, for coming on. Really appreciate you. You're the best. Anything you want to plug in for listeners before we go?
No, just press box twice a week, Monday with my partner, David Shoemaker, and then a big, juicy, hopefully juicy interview show later in the week. I did ESPN's Laura Rutledge.
It was awesome, by the way. Great interview. Yeah, that was a great interview. Yeah, she's awesome. Bryan, thanks again, man. Appreciate it. Let's talk soon.